All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network, streaming on all your podcast platforms. Video episodes also available on YouTube. Mitch Michals from the Santa Monica studio. In-person chat, Nick Monroe back on the podcast. A busy man. I know you've been broadcasting all over the world now. Second Serve's been taking off. Thanks for taking time to do the show.
No, thanks for having me. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I want to do, and we're going to get to the current events and Second Serve, but there was one thing I wanted to mention. Like a lot of people, especially on this side of the world, didn't sleep at all during AO. I got to hear you call some of those World Feed matches from courtside, and I thought that was, a natural role for you, but also just the three-person broadcast and the ability to, have that courtside analyst role. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, that was one of my first times doing courtside. I actually, the first one I did was Zverev against Mickelson, and then I ended up doing the semifinal match of Djokovic and Sinner as well. But just to see from that perspective, just hearing how, being on tour with the guys, I know how big they're hitting the ball, but just seeing courtside how everyone's moving, the way the wind's changing, just different variables that the guys are having to deal with that sometimes you can't really maybe see from the commentating booth. But yeah, I mean, Sinner was absolutely crushing the ball. Crazy. And so it was just so cool to see that dynamic. And it was just fun. Yeah, the one I caught start to finish was, I think, Nori Zverev you were sitting for. Yeah. And it was interesting, too, because that was a great match. But also the insight of, and you played and you've been in the locker room and you're just freshly removed, but you're sharing insight like, I was around, I talked to the team, I know this. And that's the insight that as fans were thirsty for, but only the people that are around can actually provide. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I was around those guys throughout the entire 2 weeks in the locker room with them because I was helping a doubles team, Jean-Julien Roger and Lloyd Glasspool. So just being able to speak to Sasha and at that time he said, hey, man, I'm feeling 100% healthy. I'm ready to go. Also sitting courtside, seeing the ball going over the net on different trajectories, right? Cam Norrie was hitting the ball so much higher over the net. Zverev more through the court. So seeing that dynamic too. But yeah, that insight of just being around the guys, since I know them so well, can kind of ask them anything I want and they'll respond. Yeah, it's a credibility thing too. Like, you obviously have it, but also they know you and they know you're not going to burn them with stuff that you say on the air. Not going to burn them. No. So it's great. It was great to see that. And we're in an interesting time. But you feel that, every year in clay court season, we like to drive up like the interest, and obviously there's so much fun, but it does really feel like this is, on the men's side, as wide open as a road to Roland Garros as there's been. It's completely wide open, and a lot of the guys, I mean, obviously they're seeing Rafa and kind of his vulnerability, the way his body is holding up or not holding up, and it was interesting just for him to be able to come back. We hadn't seen him since January. He played a great first round last week and then lost to de Minaur, but I think guys are like, wow, okay, this guy's won it 14 times. He's kind of out of the mix. I mean, no one's really feeling like he could go 3 out of 5 sets with the way his body's holding up. So now you've got, Alcaraz and Djokovic is not playing in Madrid. So it's like, okay, wait a second, what's going on with Novak? Yeah. And then, there's the Sinners and Tsitsipas, who just won in Monte Carlo and finals of Barcelona, but not really a lot of people are talking about Casper Ruud. And he made the finals in 22 and 23. And this is a guy that just made the finals of Monte Carlo, won Barcelona. He loves the dirt. And he was saying, look, this was the biggest title of my career, winning the 500 in Barcelona. But he's been at the cusp there of winning a Grand Slam. And it's just funny. Everyone else is talking about Sinner and Alcaraz and Tsitsipas, but what about Casper Ruud? Can't leave him out. Sinner hasn't done, and I love Sinner also, but he hasn't done it on the clay. It's a fair criticism. And when you have Zverev, Zverev's another one that's in the mix. When you have Djokovic and Alcaraz not playing, it's fair to wonder what their form's going to be. As great as they are, and Djokovic is, getting older, and the rust factor versus not playing is a real thing. Not going to be in Madrid also. That's a big deal. Yeah, that and the coaching change. I mean, not having Goran Ivanisevic, and now is doing some work with Nenad Zimonjić a little bit. And so you're not really sure where his mindset is and maybe how that relationship is working because, he only played, Monte Carlo with Nenad, made semis there, but now playing out of Madrid. So you don't know where he's at physically or mentally. So again, it's just opening up the doors for a lot of these other players. And for Sasha Zverev, he's got to also feel like, hey, man, this could be my chance. I mean, remember when he got hurt, semifinals of Roland Garros, the guy was playing some of the best tennis of his career. So he knows he can play great tennis at Roland Garros. Yeah, and for people listening, like we named like 6, 7 guys that could win, and that might not seem like a lot, but in the past, what's been 2.5? Yes, yeah. So, no, in the past, it's just been Rafa. Yeah. So it's like, well, Rafa's won it 14 times. Like, he's just going to keep winning it. Yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. Rafa is playing Madrid. Some of the quotes, I was talking to you beforehand about what he said this morning, and it was,
I would say jarring just because of who it is. Rafa's never really been as open and forthright about how he's feeling and where the finish line is. But he essentially said, I wouldn't play RG, I wouldn't play Roland Garros if I felt the way I do right now. He obviously knows how much this tournament means to him and playing in Spain, but it was kind of interesting to hear him say that, and also point out, Nick, that RG is not the end of the road, the Olympics, and then we heard the Laver Cup, but other events are still on his calendar.
Yeah, it's interesting he said that also because, in Barcelona, when he lost to De-Minaur, he said, look, I'm ready to prepare and die at Roland Garros, right? So it's kind of like he said that in Barcelona thinking, oh, man, okay, if he's willing to give everything he has at Roland Garros, but now he's come out and said, oh, well, maybe I might not play if my body feels like this. So the body maybe is kind of going downwards, really in a downward spiral the last few days, right? Compared to what he said at Barcelona. And now 3-4 days later, now it's changed. So, he's always been a guy that's wanted to take, he's so physically hard on his body the way he plays, but he's always made sure to take care of his body. And as we said, hadn't played since January, just came back in April. So he's going to do what's right for him. He's not going to go overboard, I wouldn't think. And again, it's been the serve. It's been the serve that hasn't been able to get a lot of pop. He was serving around the 90s in Barcelona.
Right, and that motion, too, and I want to ask you this, too. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because the way he was serving, clearly abbreviated. It, in my thought from the outside, was either there's something wrong or he's protecting it in case something could go wrong. When you see a serve like that, it's clearly compromised, and you wonder I'm wondering if you thought it was maybe just protection or if there might be something going on the way he was serving.
Well, I think it's a little bit of the back, the shoulder, and, you start to use other parts of your body when those other things are affected. And so I think he was maybe just not sure how hard he could go at it. Look, he had only played now, that was 2 matches. He played some practice matches, but you never know, when you get in those competitive situations, just that, emotion and things that you're going to feel in the body. But that was the thing. He played De-Minaur, who's such a great returner. De-Minaur was able to put the returns deep in the court. Rafa was pretty much always off balance. De-Minaur was on top of the baseline. Rafa was so far back. And he just wasn't able to kind of push De-Minaur around. We're used to seeing Rafa push players around, kind of keep them on a string. But against De-Minaur, he wasn't able to. And, if he wins his first round here in Madrid, then Rafa will play De-Minaur again. So be interesting to see if there would be any changes there and whatnot. But again, he would just have to get through his first round against Darwin Blanche.
That was hilarious, Darwin Blanche, 16-year-old kid, the reaction to Nadal playing a Gen Z kid who literally wasn't alive when he won his first Roland Garros. So that just full circle. And also playing De-Minaur, and this, what a step up. Like there's playing someone off of an injury and then there's playing De-Minaur off an injury because if you're talking bad draws, like that guy's going to give you nothing and you're going to, it's going to be a work day. I heard Paul Annacone say that, like you're going to run, he's going to make you play. And De-Minaur's coming into his own as playing the best tennis in his life.
Yeah. I mean, he reminds me a lot of David Ferrer. David Ferrer back in the day got into world number 3. And one of those guys who you look on the other side of the court, you always see him bouncing around before the service return. And so if you're feeling a little tired, you're like, man, does this guy ever get tired? So that's how you feel against De-Minaur. You go to bed the night before thinking, man, I'm going to have to work 3-4 hours to beat this guy because he's not going to beat himself. He's so physically fit. And, now De-Minaur is also able to play more aggressive.
Right.
Before it was kind of a great counter puncher. He could move, he could defend, but now he's playing more aggressive. He's taking more chances. And what's interesting is he's also going bigger on his serve, and his service percentage is like in the 40 percentile or so on the first serve. But he's okay with that because he's thinking to himself, okay, if I can get a few more free points, so I don't have to use my legs quite as much, then that'll help. But he keeps doing it, even though maybe it's only in the 40s. He's hoping that it'll keep getting better. So De-Minaur's one of those guys that just continues to get better and better. So, he's definitely playing the best tennis of his career.
The last thing I'll say on Nadal, and I don't think any of us should try to put ourselves in his shoes, given what he's accomplished and how wired differently he is. But he wants to compete, but he also wants to win. So if he can't, and that's kind of where he's coming from, the way I'm reading it is that if he doesn't believe he can win, if his body's not going to allow him that chance, then that's where he says, look, what's the point of even playing if I can't win?
Yeah, I mean, again, he, after Barcelona, he said, look, I'm willing to die at Roland Garros, but then now commenting today that, if my body feels like this, I'm not going to play. So a lot of things seem to be going through his mind, but he's also said, he'd like to play Olympics. He signed up for Laver Cup a couple of days ago. So, there's other things that he's trying to play as well. So it's almost like he wants to see what all the events he can play, but his body needs to be healthy.
Well, the other big story this past week, you mentioned him, Casper Ruud. He's up to number 6 in the world, and with an open field going into Roland Garros, why can't he be the guy? He wins his biggest title of his career in Barcelona, gets revenge on Tsitsipas, who beat him in the Monte Carlo final. He wins the rematch. I was so impressed, not just with what Casper Ruud can do, because we've always known about the weapons, but it was the parts of his game that aren't heralded that really shined. He came to net a lot. His backhand was great. He even got some free points on the serve. This was a very polished, very clean version of Casper Ruud in the biggest win of his career so far.
Yeah, you look, I mean, in Monte Carlo, Tsitsipas really kind of exploited the fact that Casper Ruud stands so far behind the baseline on second serve return, so Tsitsipas was serving and volleying. Tsitsipas was also coming in on Casper's backhand. So, it's funny, on second serve, we were discussing it the day before the finals match, and we were saying, okay, will Casper make any adjustments? And knowing Casper Ruud, knowing his family, I mean, they're going to make adjustments. I mean, he's a top 10 player in the world, as you said, 6 now. So I was looking to see, okay, is he going to step up on the baseline on second serve returns and not allow Tsitsipas to come in, which he did. Stepped up early, took that return early, didn't allow Tsitsipas to come forward as much. And he said, look, I knew you liked to come forward against me in Monte Carlo. Now I'm going to be the one to come forward against you so that you can't attack me first. And that's always been the game plan against Tsitsipas. If you can come in on his backhand, make him pass cross court, he doesn't have a great one there. So it's just doing it consistently. And Tsitsipas is so great on clay because not a lot of people come into the backhand because they get stuck behind the baseline. But when they played there in Barcelona, Casper Ruud said, look, I'm coming forward. I'm going to make you pass off your backhand, and I'm not going to let you serve and volley.
He's just so professional, right? Like how he handles not just wins and losses, but the process of going in, making adjustments, going tournament to tournament. There's something to be said for that. It's a hard skill. It's an underrated skill to have. He's just a professional tennis player in every sense of the word. Yeah,
I mean, look, if you're in the top 10, all of these guys are, but it comes out. Everyone knows each other's strengths and weaknesses. There's no reinvent the wheel. You just have to think, okay, it's a chess game. This guy's going to try to come in, so I need to come in first. Or so you got to just figure out what game plan is going to work on that day. And as you said, he can make so many adjustments. He's got a great slice. He volleys very well. He plays some doubles with Will Blumberg, a buddy of mine from the University of North Carolina. They play quite a bit of doubles. They play at Wimbledon every year. So he likes being up at the net, doing those things. So it's almost like you want to see him do it more in his matches, right? Because he's got such a big forehand. Use that and come forward, and he's an athlete.
Well, styles make fights. It's just like combat sports. You're never going to see the same fight twice. You're going to see adjustments, and when they rematch, it was great to see Casper get that win. Even for Tsitsipas, Nick, he gets back to a final. Coming into clay season, he hadn't really found the stride in his game, and now he's back where he belongs because a Monte Carlo win, and even though he lost in the final in straight sets, that's 2 solid weeks for a guy who was needing that result.
2 solid sets. And look, we also had him on the Second Serve show last week. And one of the things he was talking about was because he had some back injuries throughout the offseason. And so from Australia all the way up until pretty much Monte Carlo, he had tried 2 different serves. He's always had a platform serve, and then he tried to do a step-up serve to help his back and help the pain there. And then he said once he got to Monte Carlo, he said, look, I'm going to go back to my platform serve because when you've done something for so long in your life, you feel like you know what kind of return's going to come back, how you're going to fall into the court after that platform serve, and you're going to feel more comfortable. So he said, look, I needed to go to a comfortable position, comfortable serve, and his game started to feel better and better. He said once he went back to something that he knew, because he said the step-up serve felt great at the beginning, and then a week or 2 later, he's like, wait a second, this doesn't feel as good. So it's interesting how, things feel great at first, and that's fine. You got to make adjustments. And so he made the adjustment to go back to what he knew. But yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys that on the dirt, again, he just has more time. He's able to use his forehand inside in, inside out. People can't attack his backhand. And so that's why clay is so good for him.
You bring up a good point, too, because it's how, and I'm not going to go on a tangent about how long the season is, but you hear players talk about how hard it is to make adjustments and change things. Ego is the big example. She knew she had to improve her serve, but where is the window to do that when you have big tournament after big tournament? It sounds like Tsitsipas had a lot of the same. He gets a short window, and then it doesn't feel comfortable, and the name of the game is to win matches and get ranking points.
Yeah, but look, you have to make adjustments even throughout the year. I mean, we play 11 months out of the year, and there's no other sport that does that. So you have to be okay with making those adjustments throughout the year and saying, look, I'm going to make this adjustment. I know it's going to be good for the long term. So if I lose some matches, if I lose some practice matches, whatever, I know it's going to be good in the long run. And that's what a guy like De-Minaur's doing.
Right.
He's going bigger on his serve. He's like, okay, if I lose some matches and if I'm at 40% first serve, that's fine because it's going to be better in the long run. So that's exactly what Tsitsipas is doing, is now going back to the well of the platform serve. And you see a lot of players making some changes to their, even Iga Swiatek, she's made changes to her service motion. It's a bit more, it's not as long of a service motion, a bit more abbreviated. And that just happened even just in the last couple of weeks. So all these players, and she's number one in the world. So all these players are looking for that edge. You know, as an athlete, you always want to be looking for that edge. And how do I get better than the next person?
Yeah, sometimes it's one step backwards to take two steps forward. You know, it's a tough pill to swallow, but these players are champions because they do it. More with Nick Monroe here on Tennis Channel Inside In, talking Madrid and recapping last week on the clay on the road to Roland Garros. The coolest thing I saw last weekend in a world of tennis that has so many storylines, but Jan-Lennard Struff, a couple days before his 31st birthday, which, by the way, when this episode releases, will be his 34th birthday, so happy birthday to Jan-Lennard, but wins his first title of his career, home soil in Germany, beats Taylor Fritz to do it, but 33 going on 34, Nick, to finally break through, to see the emotion on his team, on himself. Just a remarkable story of perseverance and why this game is just the greatest.
Yeah, I mean, look, it doesn't surprise me one bit. I mean, there in Munich, it was so cold. I mean, we spoke to Taylor Fritz on second serve as well, and the day we spoke to him, it was 34 degrees Fahrenheit. He had just gotten off the court. I mean, he was still frozen when we spoke to him. But in those conditions, the biggest hitters were going to win, right? Yeah. Because you need to hit the ball hard to get it through the cold air to be able to get it past your opponent. And so you had big hitters. You had Taylor Fritz and Jan-Lennard Struff in the final. Holger Rune was also in the semi. So you had some of the biggest hitters in the game.
Right.
But he's one of those guys that, again, being out there on the tour with him, I played against him at Wimbledon one time, and he had played Ivo Karlovic the day before, 5.5 hours. Whoa. And so, Ivo served coming in hot. Yeah. Jan-Lennard saw so many returns. So then the next day he sees my little 110 first serve coming in there, and he was absolutely piping it like he saw every ball like a basketball. But he's also been one of those guys that's just so professional. He's always in the gym. You can see how strong he is. His fitness trainer was there with him on the sidelines there in Munich, who's been his longtime fitness trainer. Right. So, he did have to even play 2 matches in one day. On the Saturday, he played Felix, FAA. He was up 7-5-3-1. That got moved to the Saturday. He beat Felix, and then he beat Holger like a drum. I believe it's 2-2. So in the same day. So he's one of those fit players, and it didn't surprise me. I was like, man, to play the final at home, that's where he wanted to be, and to hit through those cold conditions. He was the man.
He saved a lot of set points in that first set too, so he battled. It wasn't smooth sailing, but cool to see. Madrid finalist last year, someone that could play well on clay. What's not to like about that story? For Taylor Fritz, it was a disappointing end, but again, a good run on clay, and now the number 1 ranked American again. It's like a seesaw. Him, Shelton, Paul's in the mix. But for Fritz, and the bigger point I want to make is, Nick, that it's so good that these players are pushing themselves. Yes. And it's good that they're going to want to be a little upset. Like, okay, he passed me, now I got to get it back. Because competition and pushing each other is going to be the way somebody breaks through.
Yeah. I mean, you better believe Taylor Fritz is one of those guys where I've always said this. He's got such a strong mind. I mean, Paul Annacone would know it better than anyone, but he feels like he can be anyone any given day. And you better believe he's looking at those rankings and thinking, okay, I want to be the number 1 American, right? And they're pushing each other. I mean, I believe they're 50 points. Taylor's 50 points ahead of Shelton right now. So they're both looking at it. And then you have Tommy. So they're 13 and 14. You have Tommy Paul at 16. So you have 3 guys that are fighting for that number 1 spot. Tomorrow, I believe we're going to speak with Brad Stein, Tommy Paul's coach, and we'll ask him about that. Hey, what's Tommy? Is Tommy looking at that? What's the deal? So I think that. It's great for American tennis. We also have Francis Tiafoe at 23, and it's only a matter of time before he gets before he gets back up inside the top 20. So the Americans are pushing each other.
Quarter 25, so that's 5 in the top 25, which is no slouch, nothing to wink at there. And also an American I want to give a shout out to. Sloane Stephens wins the clay court title in Rouen in France. So a great win for her, getting back in the winner's circle. Also proving, like, look, on clay, she's kind of a different beast.
Yeah, she said, look, I grew up in Florida. I know I love sliding into shots, and it's interesting because Sloane on clay is a very physical surface. You have to move, you have to slide, you have to outwork your opponent. Sometimes on hard court, we can see her get maybe a little lazier with her feet, not move as much, and kind of, but on the dirt, she does such a better job of kind of outworking her opponent and becoming more athletic. And so she just loves that transition for whatever reason. And, but one thing that she also is so good at is getting to the net. So she does use her ability to kind of spread the court on the dirt and then look to get in. So, Kamau Murray's done a great job with her now being back in her coaching corner, because, when I was speaking with Kamau, he said, look, we just are familiar with each other. I know who she wants to warm up with. I know who she wants to practice with. I know what she likes to eat. So everything is kind of a bit more in the right game plan, and not having to search, coaches aren't having to think, what is Sloane thinking today? What is she thinking? And so she got Kamau, and she had Darian King there with her as her coach / hitting partner there in Ron. So yeah, she's got a great team around her that knows her better than anyone.
Right. The hardest part obviously is winning the matches, but you want to, as a coach and a team, just get rid of all the distractions. We're not going to worry about this and that.
Sloane knows she doesn't have to worry about Kamau. Kamau is going to pick the right person to warm up with and the right person to practice with each day. And that creates a peace of mind that you go into every single week knowing that, okay, my coach knows me.
Well, watch out for her on the road to Roland Garros. Can win it. Former finalist here. All right, I wanted to talk second serve now here, Nick, because the show is really, I'm not just tooting your horn here, but blowing up a lot. The fact that it's, not just more accessible than it was, but you guys have got a nice little groove. The guest list has been phenomenal. And just looking at it, I think the biggest picture thing for me is that you're able to have nuance and longer discussions and I love TC Live as well, but it's such a shorter show. It's a shorter format. When something happens, like, for example, the Rublev disqualification in Dubai, I watched that second serve segment where you guys were breaking down, okay, let's get into why this happened in a nuanced way. And I think it's a good medium to have these longer form discussions.
No, it's great. Because look, things are happening so fast in tennis, with Rublev, look, he's been 5 and 6 on losses ever since then, and hasn't really been able to find his groove. But I think with second serve, it's so great because, again, like you said, we're able to have these guests on, we're able to kind of talk tennis, but talk life and what's their passion, what's their mentality, why do they play the sport? Last week we had Reggie Bush on, and so to bring on a football player and talk about his mentality, and his daughter was there, Bryces, and it's just so nice to just. He loves tennis, Reggie. So nice. He hung out for an hour and a half with us and watching tennis, talking tennis, and so cool to have that. And then also we had Red Foo on last week.
2 hours, right?
2 hours, yeah. So again, it's just when you're bringing in kind of different sports and actors and athletes, there's so much we can learn from each other. But definitely with the guest, I think all of the players, they always text me after and they're like, man, that was so much fun, right? Because we're not buttoned up and, it's like, hey, we can kind of relax and have some fun with this and ask you some fun questions. You can ask us. So even like Sloane Stephens and Ron last week, we were talking about what she was going to do after the match. And she was like, well, I got to go get some bubble tea and I got to make this interview quick because they close in 15 minutes. And, and then Chiz started giving her a hard time because Chiz doesn't like bubble tea. So just fun to have those little jokes, on camera.
Yeah, you, Jeff Chisever, and Jason Goodall, who's also, seeing Jason show that personality is nice too. It's like, wow, it's
Jason gets a little chippy. I didn't know. Jason has his idea on something, and he's going to stick with it.
Yeah, it was like the debate where he was moving a little closer. It's like back your chair up a little bit. But no, it's all great. And I love the organic things where, you had Red Foo, Paolini, Jasmine Paolini breaking down his forehand, which obviously you're not going to script that. It just kind of happened.
It just happened. And Paolini's like, yeah, you're right. Like, I've actually shortened my forehand swing. And Red Foo's like, this is how you should do it, and showed on camera how she should do it. And so you can learn a lot from second serve.
It keeps the focus too on the tennis, because whether it's Reggie Bush, and there was the end of that Tsitsipas match. It was an insane one in Barcelona, and then you had Tsitsipas calling the Badosa match, which was funny. So I do like that, where you're able to interview players, but you're still and with all these tennis matches going on, I think that's the other point, is that on linear TV, it's hard to get to all these matches early, and this is another way to watch tennis.
Yeah, and what's fun too is this is another way to watch tennis. We're obviously talking about the tennis, what's happening, while also interviewing the player or person. But we're telling a lot of different stories of other players, right? Like we had Elise Mertens on, and she's #1 doubles player in the world. She's top 30 in singles. And so a lot of people had maybe never really heard from Elise or know what she's about, but she had so much personality and came on. So again, we're learning the stories of a lot of the players 30 in the world and below, right? And sometimes we don't get those stories, right? We get the stories of Rafa and Novak and Holger Rune and whatever, but there's these other players that are 30 to 100 that are great players. Tomorrow we're going to have Taro Daniel on, and Taro Daniel won his first round today in Madrid.
Yeah.
He's so excited to come on. If you haven't heard from Taro before, he's got this personality that just lights up the whole camera and everything. So I'm so excited to have him on just to talk about the conditions of Madrid, what's going on, how are things, how is it moving? We also have tomorrow, we have Gabriel Echeverria, who's the fitness trainer for Ben Shelton. So we're going to talk about what are the fitness deals that you're doing with Ben? How are you getting him faster on clay court? What are you focusing on? Do you focus on the hammies, the quads, whatever? So it's fun to kind of get the trainer's perspective, the physio's perspective, the players, and all that.
Yeah, they have personalities that, they're down there. We just don't know about them. And this is a good way to bring that out.
Yes.
And the crossover appeal, too. You mentioned Reggie Bush got his Heisman back today.
Yeah,
so.
I think it was because he's on second serve. I mean, they actually quoted him. I mean, saying that the landscape of college football has changed so much, and that was a quote from our show. So someone was listening, and it's just awesome for him.
I don't want to give away too much. I know you got a lot of connections, and I know that there's people outside now love the crossover appeal. So I think there might be some guests coming that are outside the tennis world but like tennis. So.
Yeah, I think we've got. I think we got a few good ones. Been speaking with Jamie Foxx and Larry Fitzgerald. Actually, is texting with Larry right now. So he loves tennis. So again, it's just fun to bring in kind of different, sports and entertainment.
Well, before I let you go, blast talking as always, Nick Monroe on Tennis Channel Insight, and we do have Madrid coming up. Do you have a sense of another unpredictability event, especially on the men's side? Alcaraz going for a three-peat, Zverev looking for his third title, and then what to make of Sinner, first time ever a Masters 1000 top seed. A lot of storylines. I'm just curious your read going into it.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, right? Because Alcaraz didn't play in, I don't know. You're not sure who's healthy, who's not healthy. I feel like with Zverev, I love how big he plays on the dirt. So in Madrid, because of how fast it is, those balls fly like pellets. So it's so hard to kind of keep longer rallies going just because they're flying like pellets. But I love how big he serves and hits the ball. Yeah. That I almost feel like he's one to watch there. You hope that Alcaraz is healthy. With Jannik Sinner, I mean, he's just looking for that form on the dirt. So there's so many things that you can look for, but it's going to be a fun one.
It's a weird tournament, especially with the altitude. I don't know if you saw, there's the video of Medvedev. Of course, love Daniil Medvedev, but he's working on his high forehands. He's frustrated because of how the ball's bouncing. So
that ball bounces so high. And that's the thing. When Zverev serves, the ball is, even on a normal hard court in normal conditions, I played against him many times, and the ball was always over my head no matter what. So in Madrid, it's even higher. So, going to be tricky for guys to return and play well.
Yeah, never count any of these guys out, especially these champions. Nick Monroe, always a pleasure. Make sure you check out Second Serve. Starting I think tomorrow, right? You got a nice another run coming up. So.
Yeah, it'll be 8 to 11 Pacific time tomorrow, and then Friday through Wednesday 5 to 9 a.m. Pacific.
All right, check it out on T2. Nick Monroe, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on Tennis Channel Insight In.
Mitch, you're the man.